Is Canada a better investment than the US? Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie Lake, and today I'm talking markets with Jared Dillian, editor of the Daily Dirtnap newsletter. Hi, Jared. How are you?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well. So, as you can all probably see and maybe even hear, I am not at my usual perch in my home studio today. I'm on the road in Tallahassee, actually, Florida, uh, which maybe a lot of you haven't been to, but I'm here for some family stuff. It's my mom's birthday. When you have a birthday in your 80s, especially in the latter part of your 80s, everyone's really important. So we're all trying to get together and celebrate her. So I am on the road. So thank you for bearing with me if we have any technical issues, but I don't think we will. But I'm super psyched to see you, Jared. This was not a great way to end the week. We had that stronger than expected US payroll number, and that sent yields higher, stocks lower. Um, and so I wanted to get your thoughts on the US economy, but also Canada. We teased it in the description. You've been thinking a lot about Canada, which is always really interesting given your history. So I want to kind of maybe compare and contrast these two big economies, and see how you're thinking about the risks and opportunities. But let's start with the US. What did you make of the number? I mean, is US economy as strong as that number suggests?
It is. The economy is strong. And if you go back to the last Fed meeting, where we cut 25 basis points, and there was the dissent from Beth Hammock, who is the new Cleveland Fed president. And she said, we don't need to cut rates 25 basis points. And she has been vindicated. We've had nothing but strong data since then.
Mm.
That rate cut was a mistake. Actually, all those rate cuts were a mistake. The first 50 basis point cut was a mistake because the unemployment rate went up and it triggered the Somm rule, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, we're going into a recession." Then Claudia Somm says, "Actually, we didn't trigger the Somm rule, and we cut 100 basis points for no reason, and stocks went up 10%, and this is where we are, right?" So
Yeah.
looking out to next year, we had 3 rate cuts priced in. Now we have 1. If you want to have a conversation about how many we're going to cut next year, it's impossible to predict, and it depends upon a lot of things. So,
So does it feel like, I mean, before you, first of all, you're so right about the Fed, because that 50 basis points also meant everyone got ahead of the Fed, right? Everyone baked in all this easing. But does it feel like we're at this kind of moderate growth pace, or are we looking at much stronger growth than expected? Because it would be another year where those recession calls, I just had a conversation with somebody who, again, is expecting recession, and they keep getting revised. Before, it was the lag and all the fiscal spending. What's supporting the economy right now if it's so strong?
well, first of all, I'm not gonna say we're not gonna have a recession in 2025, because recessions can sometimes be a surprise, right?
Mm.
Like what we had with COVID in 2020, like that was a surprise recession. But looking at the way things are right now, it sure doesn't seem like we're going to get one, especially with Trump coming in and doing all these pro-growth things and cutting taxes and blah blah blah. So it doesn't seem like we're going to get a recession. Um, so
So what does that mean for Treasury yields?
well, so the bond bottomed at 394 a couple of months ago, and it touched 5% today. So in the span of 2 or 3 months, the bond yield is up 100 basis points, and 10-year yields are up about 60 or 70. Okay. I
Mm.
think that the bond sell-off is a little overdone. I think it's maybe got 10 or 20 basis points to go, but I think that shorting bonds has become very consensus from a sentiment standpoint. And we're probably going to let me put it this way: the people I'm seeing on Twitter that are saying you should short bonds here, I do not respect their opinions. Okay.
Mm.
So like they're the contras, right? So people are piling into this higher rates idea, and I think it's going to top out pretty soon. So
Interesting. Well, that'll be welcome news to people, because I think there's real concern that we have yields here that look vulnerable to the upside, and you've had the UK yields. It just seems like there's a lot of strain in the sovereign bond markets. And somebody, I think, I read somewhere in a note that, in addition to the economy being strong, you have this problem that there are less buyers of treasuries. Now, I don't know if you agree with that, but the idea that the Japanese are not buying as many treasuries and the Chinese may not be buying as many treasuries. Does that worry you? Is that another factor outside the economy that it could put upward pressure on yields?
No, it doesn't worry me. I mean, the thing about when yields go up is that it makes bonds more attractive, right? And
Mm,
bond traders back a couple decades ago, they had this saying, they used to call it the rule of sevens, right? And it was based on 7% interest rates. But basically, what that means is anytime yields get to a big round number like 5%, there's usually resistance there because people say, "Oh my God, I can get 5% on a bond," and they buy bonds. So, it's bond bear markets never go down in a straight line because you always find support because people find these yields attractive and they come in and buy them. So, right now it seems impossible that 10-year yields would rally 50 basis points, but you have to use your imagination. It could happen. I think it's very
mm.
possible that it could happen. So,
So, how are you thinking about stocks here? Because we saw that reaction today. Is it because they're worried about yields, or does this feel like a market that's just looking for a reason to go down?
I think it's actually more the latter. I think it's more the latter. So, I'm short. Um, I put the trade on 3 or 4 weeks ago. I had some technical signals that I was looking at, DeMark, MACD, stuff like that. I think you had Max AI Mania about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And yeah, like I'm at, the price action. Here's the thing. I mentioned this to Tony a couple of weeks ago. Um, from that little mini meltdown that we had until December, from August to December, there was not one trading day where the S&P closed on the lows.
Hmm.
Like it would reach a low intraday and it would always bounce, right? So that's what I call positive price action. So we had positive price action for like 4 months. In the last couple of weeks, the market is closing on the lows every single day, including today, right? And that's the type of stuff that I look at. This is not positive price action. And we have some support around 5850, 5900 in the S&P. There seems to be some support there. I think I mean, we broke down to 5820 today. I thought we were going to go low. I thought the trap door was going to open up and we were really going to go
Yeah,
down.
it felt like that at one
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
But nonetheless, I think we have more downside. So,
All right, so that's how you're feeling about the U.S. Let's talk about Canada, but I want to set this up a little bit because you've been writing about Canada in your newsletter, and it certainly made us stand up and pay attention because you have a long history with Canada. We've talked about it before. We talked about it when we did My Life in Four Trades. What is it about Canada? Just for people who don't know, what got you interested in Canada in the first place, and it was housing, right? Was it Canadian housing that you were looking at
yeah, it was
that you
back in
tangled with for decades?
yeah, it was back in 2013 and like I said in the podcast I did with you, I've never been more wrong on a trade, and I've never made so much money on a trade. I was right for the wrong reasons, right?
Wait, so we have to know why for those who didn't. Just refresh
It's
us.
it's ki- it's very it's complicated. Like,
All right, not
um,
for a longer show. We don't have
it's
it.
a
We don't
yeah,
have.
yeah.
Okay, all right. So that's why I think we talked about it as your best and worst trade. So but you kind of broke up with Canada, right? Like that trade just tortured you, and you kind of broke up with Canada for a while, didn't you?
I finally closed out of that trade in 2020. I had it on for 7 years. And
Which is a crazy long time to have a trade on.
yeah,
7 years.
I am very patient. I am very patient. So, but no, it's looking interesting now. I mean, Trudeau resigned, and the Conservative Party leader, Pierre Poilievre, I think is how you say his name. It's funny, I like the guy so much, but I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Pierre he is Javier Milei, right? And a lot of that is a trade that I got right in the Daily Dirtnap. Like I spotted Javier
Argentina.
Milei very early. I said he was going to be the next president. He got elected president. He's done all these reforms. It was a great trade. So
It was
what
a
I'm
great trade.
telling
I will
you
say,
is,
I'm just going to interrupt you, and I will say that because it was no one was talking about it when you
yeah.
first brought it up in your note, and we talked about it on air. For those of you who've been with us, we talked about it on air quite a bit, and I think a lot of people discounted that he would win. So you were right on that. So and he's been ushering on all these reforms. Hi everybody in the chat. Not sure if you've all been watching Argentina, but I think by now you know what's been going on there. So you see parallels.
Oh, I mean, it's an exact parallel. It's an exact parallel. And basically, this is one of my favorite trades to do, like internationally. Anytime you have a country that is economically unfree, like Canada, like Argentina, and it suddenly becomes free, you have explosive growth. Explosive growth. I get pushback. I've been talking about this for like the last week or two. I'm getting pushback on Twitter and in my inbox and other places. People like Canada's problems are so deep, they can't be fixed. It's doomed, whatever. Shut up. You freaking missed the Argentina trade because you were an idiot. And now, like I'm telling you, it's the exact same thing. So Pierre is going to lower taxes. He's going to get rid of the carbon tax. Interest rates have come off the highs. Everybody was worried about interest rates blowing up the housing market, but they've come off the highs. Canada, by the way, had payrolls today too. Don't pay attention to the Canadian payroll numbers. StatsCan is the worst government statistics organization in the world. Their payroll numbers are not adjusted for seasonality. They're highly volatile. They said they had 90 something thousand jobs. Like if you annualize that, that's 1 million jobs. They're not creating 1 million jobs in a country of 38 million people. The statistics are garbage, right? So don't pay attention to the statistics. But Pierre is gonna. I mean, there's an 89, according to Polymarket, there's an 89% chance he's going to be elected. He's going to be running against either Chrystia Freeland or Mark Carney. If Mark Carney is running, he probably has a slightly better chance of winning. But like I said, 89%, he's probably going to win. So
do you think that he is is there an appetite for reform in Canada? Is that what's going to sweep him into office? Or, because I think Argentina and Canada are kind of they are very different. I'm interested that you see it playing out the same way, because Argentina kind of shut out of international markets, right? Defaulted on their debt, that have issues with inflation. Canada very much is sort of, the steadfast developed country. Do you think that level of reform, there's an appetite for that level of reform that he was able to pull off? Why?
Yeah, because in both situations, and this is really more of a social psychology issue, but in both situations, you have a population that is completely demoralized by crappy economic policies, right? Like things cannot possibly get any worse. The average household in Canada is spending 70% of their income on mortgage payments, right? It's unsustainable. Okay. And not to mention, I mean, they had the inflation problem too and everything else. So, but really their tax burden is incredibly high, right? So you start cutting that tax burden and magical things are going to happen. So, a lot of people suffer from a lack of imagination, right? They look at things in a very static way and they see it's bad right now, right? Well, things will change, okay? So, like I said, I think there's almost no chance that Pierre doesn't get elected, and great things are going to happen. So, the currency, I think base case is going to strengthen about 10% to the dollar, right? And the TSX, and by the way, Canada has a funny kind of stock market. It's not like the US. There's no tech companies. They have some energy companies, but it's mostly banks and basic materials, banks and mining companies. So it's not a very diverse basket of stocks. But even still, the TSX should go up 15 to 20% base case if Pierre gets elected.
Wow, those are some big moves. Lena, I think that answers your question about the Canadian dollar in the next few years. So, okay, so
And here's another thing. nothing's moved yet. Nothing has moved since Trudeau resigned. Like
Yeah.
I had the Canadian dollar up on Bloomberg when the announcement came that he resigned, and I wanted to see if it moved. It didn't move, and then over the course of like an hour, it moved like 20 basis points. It rallied like 20 basis points. So it's not like, it's not like you're missing the trade. Like it literally has not moved yet.
That hasn't happened yet. That's an out of consensus call because no, it's not on anyone's radar. So that it seems like you're thinking that opportunity is more attractive than anything here in the US. Does the US seem overvalued compared to what is potentially afoot in Canada?
The biggest stock in the US is Apple, and Apple trades at 41 times earnings and it doesn't grow, right? I mean, I posted a chart on Twitter the other day of forward PEs versus 10-year forward returns. When valuations get to this level, forward returns go to zero or negative, right? So this is a very rich stock market. Forward returns are going to go down. The R squared on this is very tight. Like it's statistically, you cannot say that this time is different. It's not going to be different. Over the next 5 to 10 years, our returns will be lower than the last 5 to 10 years. It will happen. So
is there any risk with the Canada trade that you see? Like what would cause you to rethink it? I think that because there's so much crazy, it feels like we're in this situation where politically there's going to be a lot of volatility. So I think I'm kind of asking everyone when they have a call, like what could change your mind?
well,
Is there anything that would change your mind if he doesn't win?
Yeah, if he doesn't win, basically. Yeah. And which I think only happens if Carney runs. I think that's slightly increases the probability that he loses. But yeah, that's the only thing that would make me change my mind if he doesn't win. So
Interesting. Mark Carney, former central banker, I believe, correct?
yes, of two central banks,
Actually,
Canada
UK.
and England. Yeah.
Yeah, which is really actually quite unusual. So, I mean, he knows his way around finance. That would make him, I guess, a potentially attractive candidate for some in Canada, for him to make a run and potentially thwart Pierre's attempt. So this it's happened in Argentina. You think it's going to happen in Canada. Do you think this is specific to these countries, or is this a trend where this income inequality, people feeling stuck, not being able to afford some of the basics and just being fed up with current governments? Is it broader than that? Is this a trend that you could see?
It's a trend. So what happened was Javier Milei started it in Argentina. He started a global movement, and let's just call it the Doge movement, right? Because we have Doge in the United States with Elon and Vivek.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about.
So the Doge movement is an anti-bureaucracy movement, right? One of the things that Trudeau has done as prime minister is vastly expanded the Canadian bureaucracy. He's hired tens of thousands of government employees. And by the way, in this last payroll number, the 90,000 one, that's probably spurious, 40,000 of them were government workers, right? So 40,000 of them were public employees. He's vastly expanded the bureaucracy. This is an anti-big government bureaucracy movement. So it's expanding globally. I'm also hearing about a potential for political change in Colombia, right? So that may be something to look at this year. So I still have to do some work on that, but that's another place where it may be happening.
There's a comment in the chat, Jared. 60% of mortgages in Canada get renewed mid-2025, start of 2026. Ain't over yet. I'm not sure what he means by ain't over, or she means by ain't over yet, but the housing, I mean, the housing area is what you played last time. Is that what people are pointing to in terms of kind of too big to fix, and why they're not jumping on this idea and pushing back on you? What is it about Canadian housing that potentially is so problematic to try to?
Well, the funny thing is that I was short Canadian housing when it was going up, and now I'm long it when it's going down. So I've definitely got this all wrong. But so basically Canadian mortgages are not like US mortgages. They're not
Are they
30-year
floating?
fixed rate mortgages. They're floating, they're indexed to 1-year bills, and they reset every 5 years. So every
Mm,
5 years they reset off of 1-year interest rates, right? So what this person is saying is a lot of them are going to reset in 2025 and 2026. Rates are higher than where they were 5 years ago, but also you can't really predict where rates are going to go over the next year. They might be lower, they might be higher. We'll see. So the Bank of Canada has already cut interest rates quite a bit. So I think if they had reset at 4.5% or something like that, I think that would have been a problem. But I don't think it's that big of a deal.
mm. So, how are you thinking about? We've got an inauguration coming up. Are tariffs? This is the other thing with the U.S. and
Yep.
Canada, where tariffs are potentially on the table. Is that something that you are concerned about? Do you think that some of the fears over tariffs are overblown? How do you? Because it's kind of going to be a lot of headline risk potentially. How do you navigate that?
I mean, Trump has said all over the place that he's going to raise tariffs on Canada and Mexico, right? It's a lot less likely if Pierre is in charge. Let's put it that way. It's a lot
Mm,
less likely. So I'm not, I mean, Trump, you know, Trump has been around since 2015. People have been dealing with Trump for 10 years, and they still have not figured out that he is full of shit most of the time, right? Like if he's making a rhetorical point like we're going to make Canada the 51st state, he's not actually saying we're going to like conquer Canada and like take over Canada, right? That's not what he's saying. So you don't take Trump literally. Like if he says he wants 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, it's it's a negotiating point. It's a starting point for a negotiation. Like it's not going to happen. So, and the funny
yeah.
thing is that the FX markets have priced it in as if he's talking literally, right? Like that's what
Mm.
the FX markets have priced in. So,
Yeah, because there's this question people had about whether it's just Trump being Trump and throwing bombs, verbal bombs, or whether this is an attempt, like a change in policy where, yeah, like they actually want the revenue. No one said it was that, but I think there's a question like, is it different this time? And, are we being too complacent thinking it's just negotiating? I think that's what people were a bit worried about, maybe the Forex market more, but it is interesting that that's the case. Um, do you expect the dollar to continue to strengthen here, given the strength of the U.S. economy, or do you feel like that's kind of topping out as well? Because you don't seem
tech,
to think bond yields are running away much over
technically, I
5.
think it's topping out. But having said that, I've been saying that for about 3 or 4 weeks, and I've been wrong, and I've been on the losing end of that trade. So it
Mm,
hasn't worked, but I do think it's topping out. Mostly for the reason, I mean, the dollar is pricing in tariffs, right? And they're pricing in Trump's 25% tariffs across the board, whatever. If anything less than that actually comes to pass, the dollar is going to sell off significantly. Plus, I don't think the Trump administration can tolerate the dollar at these levels. I saw a chart earlier this week. I don't remember where I saw it, but basically, the dollar over a period of decades is the most overvalued it has been in history on a purchasing power parity basis. It is the most overvalued it's been in history. They
mm.
cannot tolerate the dollar at these levels. So they're definitely going to jawbone it lower. That's going to happen on January 20th. And maybe they do something else. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've had really active intervention, but I know that people are, wondering if they're going to take that route or to try to move it because it does seem like they very much want and need a lower dollar. Question from Rick: do you have a favorite gold stock on the TSX?
Oh, that's a good question. No, I don't. I haven't even looked into it.
How are you feeling about gold in general?
I'm definitely positive on gold. I think so. Gold's in a consolidation right now, and the price action has been very positive this week. I think I think it could break out soon. It could break out at the inauguration. So, but I don't really follow Canadian listed gold miners. I don't. So,
Are you thinking about this more from a currency play, or are you going to be interested in Canadian stocks?
Oh, no, no, no. Yeah, like there's a Canadian ETF. There's a Canadian equity ETF. It's one of the iShares. And if you buy the ETF, you're buying Canadian stocks denominated in Canadian dollars. It's not currency hedged. It's not like DXJ, right? It's like EWJ. So you get the currency exposure as well as the equity exposure.
Oh, that's super important then. If you think, because you think so I'm gonna replay this for a second for Daniel because he missed the top of the show. And his question is: so is Canada going to hit the can before going up? Uh, so is it kind of hovering here, and you think it's just going to take off, or is there for potential for trouble before?
Well, I think that look, it's probably going to be. I think the election isn't going to be for a while. I think it's not maybe until the summer or the fall or something like that. I should know this, but I don't. So there's a lot of time. Okay. There's a lot of time. And it's good to be averaging into a position, just kind of dollar
Mm,
cost average it, buy a little bit every month, right? Unlike Argentina, like when Malay's polls numbers were going up, like stocks were ripping, like you had to chase it higher. But this you can average into it over the course of 2025, build a very large position, and then when Pierre takes over, that's when it should start to work. So
yeah, so interesting. I'm wondering if this trend. Have you been thinking about whether it would hit the UK as well? Because it seems like this government is also getting the thumbs down from the gilt market, and they've just had a really hard time uh, getting any. I would be surprised, given what's going on with the economy, if they didn't have the potential to have something like that
I,
in
I
discussion as well.
I'm not really an expert on UK politics, but what I will say is that the conservatives have been discredited. Labor is in the process of being discredited. The Reform Party has had bigger and bigger gains with every election. I would not be surprised if the next UK prime minister comes from the Reform Party, whether it's Nigel Farage or somebody else. And I think
Mm.
Elon Musk was like taking a dump on Nigel Farage, like saying he was like not the guy for the job, right? But that's the direction that the whole world is moving, right? So
Yeah, and we've been talking about this with people, and we're going to continue, and we're going to catch up with Dee Smith. If you remember, Dee kind of put, for those of you who saw that interview, kind of put the flag in that this is, we are in a transition. Dale was talking about it. I mean, it does feel like a lot of this isn't particular to any one place or any one candidate, and that there is an awful lot of appetite for some radical change. Just want to swing it back to U.S. Oh, sorry, we got a question from Alan. What do you think about Canadian natural resources?
I mean, that's part of the index. Like if you buy the TSX, you're implicitly buying a lot of natural resources. So, I mean, there's TS Canada has this thing called the TSX Venture Exchange, which is in Vancouver, and they have like all these mining penny stocks and energy penny stocks and stuff like that. It's that is a Wild West casino, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff that goes on there. I'm not talking about the TSX Venture Exchange. I'm talking about the big, boring, broad index with all the banks and stuff like that. So,
Yeah. Um, so I want to circle it back. I'm laughing. Paul thinks that there will be no happy hour with Maggie tonight because I am visiting my mom, but I am also with my brother and sister-in-law. So there will be a happy hour. Not to worry. Let's finish up on US stocks, Jared. So they seem like you think they're vulnerable because of the action we've seen. Is this the kind of uh pullback that we see the whole market go down, or is this a rotation type of maybe out of the Mag 7 into some stuff that's undervalued or hasn't performed as well? Is it that, does it feel like that, or does the whole market feel like vulnerable to a
well,
fairly sizable correction?
I mean, anytime you have a correction, there is a rotation. It always happens. But the important thing to remember is that seven stocks make up 35% of the index. The biggest one that I'm focused on that I'm sure is Apple. I'm sure Apple out the wazoo. Apple was down 3% today. That is one of the ugliest charts I have ever seen in my entire life. Buffett, by the way, sold 2/3 of his position. I don't know if he's selling the last tranche of it right now. But you're talking about a company. I already mentioned this. It trades at 41 times. It doesn't grow. It's all been valuation expansion. To me, that is the most obvious short candidate on the board. So,
Yeah.
and that chart, go look at the chart. The chart is ugly.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because Dale pulled it up for us, Dale Pinkert, when he was on, and he is also does not like the look of that chart. And in fact, stocks in general. And for those of you who've been watching, he emailed me today about some of those levels he discussed getting hit. So if you want to go back and look at that interview, folks, and then take a look at where things are trading right now, it might be useful. Let me just throw one thing, a question that I think about and that I hear sometimes when we talk about companies like Apple, but it's not the only one. And all the points you made are very valid. What about data, though? This idea that in our AI future, in large language models, that data is gold, right? And if you have a lot of data, then you are sitting on something that will be incredibly valuable in the future, regardless of, how that develops and how the AI develops. Does that give you pause at all about negativity, or is the time frame that you're talking about on Apple shorter than that longer term value? Because they have a lot of data on people, and they're
That sounds like one of those bubble rationalizations. Like in 1999, people were looking at stocks like clicks and eyeballs and stuff like that. Like, I don't think in a bear market, like, none of that stuff matters. You want to buy Walmart, right? You want to buy people buying like $20 rubber doormats at Walmart. Like, people just go. I don't know if you've ever had Peter Atwater on. You should if you haven't. But what he talks about is, in times of stress, we go to me here now, like the things that are immediate to us right now. And when we're not in times of stress, we think about the future. We extrapolate. We think about data. We think about AI. We think about space, right? And as that world closes, we think about ourselves. We think about our safety, and that's we're in the beginning of that process right now. So.
That's a really, really interesting comment, Jared. And it certainly feels like there's a lot of uncertainty that would make people skittish about the future. That's a really great point. One more quick question. Will there be further pullback in Bitcoin to 75K? You watching Bitcoin?
75K is a pretty big move. Could happen. I'm thinking more, the number I always had in mind was 85K. I think we'll get that back to 85K for sure. That's that I'm pretty confident in that, but I don't know about 75. So
someone just agreed with you. Stoken said 85K, good first stop for Bitcoin, then 73, and literally typed it as you said it. So great minds think alike, Stoken. Thank you for that. Great stuff, Jared. This is so interesting. For all the deets on Jared's thinking around Canada and as he watches that develop. We can drop in the chat, and it's in the description where you can go to find the Daily Dirtnap, because it's going to get really interesting in Canada. And as we said, no one's really talking about this. So we appreciate the fact that you came on and talked to us about it, Jared, because I think it's really interesting. And like we said, when you're paying attention to Canada, we're going to pay attention to Canada.
Cool.
A lot of moving parts here. Awesome. Jared, thank you so much. Thanks for spending Friday with us. Thanks to all of you. Rick, I don't have time to get to this question on China policymakers. Are you watching China at all? You have to go to the newsletter if he is, but yeah. if you're yes, no, watching it, not really, no, okay. Yeah, China's interesting. I'm going to have someone on who did a big report on China, so I'll let you know when that's happening, Rick, and we'll I think we're going to try to do that at the end of this month. Like a big, long, deep dive. So keep an eye out for that. That's coming. But thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'll tell my mom you all said happy birthday. And then we will see you back. David Rosenberg, folks, releasing on Sunday. Big conversation with Rosie, who is contrarian, as he loves to be, and had a lot to say about a lot of things. And it was fun. So keep your eye out for that. In the meantime, have a wonderful weekend, everybody. We'll see you soon. Take care and good luck out there. Thanks, Jared.
Thank you.